Hello, everybody. It is the renewal, the first of Love Talks, which is now going to be a monthly event where I meet with industry experts to talk about dating, love, relationships, and sex. And tonight, Kel Good is joining me. We're going to dive into a great conversation about sex. What does love have to do with it? Which all began from a blog post that Kel wrote that we got into in discussing sort of the differences between men and women and the sort of the first blush of attraction and what does that look like and how does it affect us differently, and kind of to have a better understanding of what happens during those initial steps of attraction that lead us to either love or lust, and what does that look like? So, Kel, I'm going to say first and foremost, thank you for being on the show tonight and getting into a great conversation with me. And I'm going to pass it over to you to share with everybody a little bit about you and what sort of your wheelhouse is, specialty, and a little bit of your background as well.
Sure. Appreciate being on the show, and thanks for having me. Now I'm hearing an echo. Should you be hearing that?
Oh, we're okay.
Okay. So how I got into this, so what I do is relationship consulting, and prior to that I still am, but I'm an IT guy, so I've been a software developer for a number of years, a Microsoft certified trainer, and so I was that typical IT guy who didn't really have an emotional connectivity about him, and ended up in a long-term relationship, not really connecting with my partner to the point where she was finally deciding maybe she wanted to leave me. And that was kind of my 2x4 head to the moment to wake up and say, okay, what's going on with me? I got to figure myself out. And that led to me starting in 2010 to study romantic love and how it works and how you find it, how you grow it, and so forth. And I've basically been in a nonstop study mode ever since, both experientially and in terms of research and that sort of thing. So I started my blog about a year ago. Relationshipoptions.ca is the site, and I blog about alternatives to traditional concepts of romantic love. As I studied romantic love more, I saw maybe there are different ways to configure our love lives than we've traditionally thought was the only way. And so I write a lot about different perspectives on all of that. And obviously in the consulting side of things, I work with people who are struggling, women, for instance, who end up continuously ending up with emotionally disconnected guys. I understand that scenario pretty well, so I'll work in that area. I've also published a book called 5 Keys to Successfully Beat Porn Addiction for Christians, because I have that Christian background, and I work with guys who are struggling with porn addiction as well. So that's kind of the me.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's a broad me, but isn't it interesting that I'm sure if you speak to anyone that works, sort of in the love and relationship dating realm, that it all comes from our own journey and sharing our stories and our experiences in order to help other people. Because I know a lot of the time you can feel a little alone out there. So it's nice to be able to have people that have gone through the experiences and be able to help them along. So we connected because we're in the same industry and have the same interests, but also we really kind of got into a conversation about this connection between men and women, or sometimes lack thereof. And it really was instigated from this blog post that you had done, and the discussion between people sometimes initial lustful reactions to each other isn't really the initial stages of love. It is lust, and how we can get lost in the mix. Do you want to speak to that a little bit and really what you were trying to share? And we'll make sure after that we share that blog post so everyone else can dive into it as well.
Yeah. So that blog post is called "Is It Love or Is It Addiction?" And what I was trying to address there, I'm constantly fascinated with the whole area of attraction versus attachment. When I was coming near the end of my relationship, I was trying to turn it around for a few years and just couldn't, it was too much, too little, too late for her. One of the last things, though, that I started studying is I started to research guys that work with guys who are in sexless marriages. And so that started me an exposure to the whole seduction community and the pickup artists. And there's a big movement online of men who are teaching men, they call themselves dating coaches and so forth, but basically they teach the art of seduction. And so I started to study this, and I don't think there's very many people who have studied attraction as extensively as these guys have done. So I started to learn about attraction, but I also, as time has gone on, have seen that, you know, what they're talking about is great if what you want to do is get out there and have some sex, but are they really doing something that will lead to true connection with a person? And so I've grown with grown a fascination to this distinction between attraction and attachment. And I think that really for long-term relationships, what we're shooting for is attachment, a deeper emotional connection rather than just attraction, which is really predominantly a biological response that we have to each other. And we can experience attraction for people we don't even know. So I've started to see that while attraction is real, it's there biologically, and I think it exists for nature's plans, which is to get babies made. It's really not the core of what we want to head towards in our relationships. So what I'm doing in that blog post is suggesting, could we start our relationships heading towards attachment up front? Because we know that the honeymoon chemistry, the new relationship energy lasts between 6 months to 3 years normally. And if you haven't built something more solid by then, your relationship's going to hit the rocks. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do in that post, is say, can we head more towards attachment rather than just attraction? Can we maybe tone the attraction thing down a bit? Because I think we get very addicted to it. We want the excitement and the intensity of it, and it kind of creates an illusion of love that's not real love.
So isn't there a little bit of an uphill battle then if you are taking that attraction level off the table? I mean, it is innately built into our DNA how both men and women work. Can you not have both? Can you have the attraction and then be able to have the level of awareness in order to nurture the emotional side of things? And I'm going to get you to also give a bit of clarity around the word attachment, because it's not always has the healthiest of connotations to it.
Right. So the first thing I will say, even in that blog post itself, is I do say that, you know, it is unlikely we will get together with anybody romantically if there isn't a certain amount of baseline attraction. So I'm not poo-pooing attraction carte blanche. Mm-hmm. I'm just, in a sense, like you said, I'm advocating a lot greater awareness, that it plays a much bigger part than it needs to or sometimes should in terms of really becoming connected with a partner. As far as attachment as I'm using it, and I understand what you mean, because obviously attachment theory talks about insecure attachments of various sorts, and I would have classified, there's different terminologies, but I would classify historically myself as a love avoidant, and normally a love avoidant will attract a love addict, and both of those are insecure attachments that people can have. So yeah, I understand the use, and it is challenging to choose terminology, because there's for any term we use in the relationship field, there seems to be 3 potential meanings, you know, for each one of them. And which one do you mean this week, right? So for me, when I say attachment, what I see is real romantic love to me is coming to value a person for who they actually are, valuing someone as a person and wanting to share yourself with them as a result. So to me, the key to real attachment is this idea of really coming to value my partner and wanting to have a connection with her as a result of that. And this is where I distinguish between it and attraction, because with attraction, I can find someone attractive I don't even know. And so it's that real knowing a person, really valuing them as a person and wanting to be connected with them because of that. Another terminology I guess we could use is bonding. You know, we're
emotional connection is what I'm hearing. You're having
real emotional connection, which I would distinguish between that and what many women think is emotional connection and attraction. I think attraction for women is this desire to be swept off their feet by a man romantically and so forth, and that to me is the equivalent on the female side to the man's desire to have sex. And neither of those is real emotional connection as I would define it. I think it's deeper than that. It's more about valuing the person than just having a real overwhelming feeling.
Okay, well, I can literally hear all the women that are potentially watching this, their ears going like this. So, how do you mean that the desire to be swept off your feet, can that not include emotional connection? Someone who actually really wants to get to know you, or are you just talking about
No,
being
I mean,
moved? Are you talking about the flowers and the largeness of someone
I'm,
making
I
romance?
recognize attraction can be present with attachment.
Hmm.
So we can value someone and want to know them, and we can do things that also make them feel that way. Same as a man can have sex but still be connected emotionally, right? So
Right.
it's not that attraction, it's an either or, that we can't experience attraction if we have attachment or vice versa. It's more, for me, the major emphasis needs to be somewhere it really is not often put. When we are in the dating scene, especially, with the pickup artists and the seduction community, it's all about stirring those feelings in a woman so that they can get to sex. So they are playing women, the player terminology. They are playing on those emotional stirrings that happen in a woman, which is how her attraction takes place. I mean, there's a reason why romance novels are called female porn, because it is for you gals, that's how you get sexually stirred, is through romantic feelings, that sort of thing. Whereas we're much more direct on the physical side. Women tend to be, and again, all of these things are generalizations. There's obviously people that don't fit these statements as well, but in general, that is why they call romance novels and so forth female porn, because those stirrings is what leads to a woman wanting to be sexual with a man, the same as a man's physical view of a woman and so forth leads to him wanting to be sexual.
So how is one making the difference? If someone's making romantic, overtures to, if a man's making romantic overtures to a woman, where is the line of legitimacy and then also integrity on his part? Are those romantic overtures only being done in order to have a sexual endgame? Or how is one differentiating it? I can see that being very
Yeah.
confusing.
I think the bottom line to me is there a genuine desire to know each other,
Mm-hmm.
to really know each other, not just make each other feel this way, but actually know this person. If I know this person, then I am happy to be, emotionally, romantically interactive with her, but I want to know that's in place first. I want to know that I have someone who I genuinely value before I start escalating physically, say. The pickup artists will say, move to sex as quick as you can and start escalating and physically touching and everything else as quickly as you can, because they know that will produce those emotions in a woman and make her more ready to move in that direction, kind of thing. So to me, I prefer to move much slower. I prefer to take time to really know someone. And when I really come to know her and really love her for who she really is, then it's very natural for me to want to move in a physical direction.
Okay. So this, I would assume, what I'm hearing is that people understanding the benefit of healthy boundaries and knowing what those are. So you're suggesting that time should be taken in most, if not all cases, before things are moving to a sexual part of the relationship. Is that right?
Yeah, and I mean, and understand, I'm not saying I should in any kind of moral sense, or I'm expressing a value system that someone can embrace or not.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I don't want a first kiss before I really genuinely feel like I could want to be in a relationship with this person.
So love at first sight, then chemistry can be developed, Cal?
Sure. Like I again, love at first sight is an attraction reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Of course we can have that. And I've had both. I've had relationships that started with intense attraction up front, and I've had relationships where it was a slow burn. It was a gradual getting to know someone. Obviously, if I have intense attraction, I can't make that stop. It's what it is, right? It's a biological reaction that takes place, but I can still choose how rapidly I act on that, whether I still take the time to get to know that person before proceeding on that intensity.
Or making a judgment like, I've met this person, I don't feel any physical attraction, which you hear more often from the male camp than you do the female camp, that I'm not feeling that sexual attraction. They seem really lovely, but I'm not going to invest any more time there if I'm not feeling that. So you're encouraging people to maybe become curious, and if you see value in who they are as a person, to spend more time with them, and that sexual attraction will evolve.
Sure, it certainly could. I mean, I think if you don't have a certain amount of baseline attraction, it may not. But my experience has been that people are an entire package. And when I get to know a girl and get to know her, not just, oh, there's what she looks like. I mean, I can walk down the street and go, wow, she's hot, you know, as far as a guy's type of reaction. And that's simply an assessment to her physical looks. But I have no clue who she is. I mean, even when I overcame porn addiction, and again, when I say overcame porn addiction, I'm not an anti-porn person. I really have dealt with the question of compulsivity regarding porn. So I have still, you know, occasionally looked at porn or whatever. But what was weird for me when I shifted is I would actually look at a porn spread and I would say, gee, I wonder what she's like as a person, which never happened before because it was all just physical attraction, right? And I shared this with a couple of gals at a meetup recently, and they kind of almost had to double take because it would never occur to them to be just looking at someone as a sex object. But that's male.
Yes, of course.
You know?
Yeah, more
so for me, yes, the attraction thing can be there, but let's get the deeper emotional connectivity that has to do with getting to know a person. I want that there really strongly before I start physically moving forward in a relationship.
And I would agree with you. That creates a lovely foundation for the potential of an actual meaningful and long-term relationship. You have touched on, though, however, that women can become more emotionally involved and then never get to that point. It's getting stuck in this friend zone that you hear so often that men hate to hear that word. So let's maybe talk about that a little bit and what exactly the friend zone is, and is it somewhere you get trapped? Is it somewhere you can evolve out of? And from a man's perspective, what does that exactly mean for you and for maybe some of your clients that you've spoken to?
Sure, and I was going to say too, I've written about 3 different blog posts on the friend zone question, and I was reviewing those today so I could remember what I think. But you like to express your thoughts with some degree of consistency.
Yes,
and I definitely, as time has gone on, did evolve in terms of my thinking about that whole area. And I recognize that women find themselves in the same place. Matthew Hussey's book, Get the Guy, he talks about the women struggling with this same phenomenon. And it was actually reading his book that kind of made me qualify my statements a bit that I had made in earlier blog posts about it, because I was seeing it as a problem, the friend zone problem. And as guys perceive that, it's that if you take the time to become a friend to a girl, you'll never get anywhere but friends. And you'll be stuck in that. And the pickup artists, again, they say that a woman has 3 buttons on her forehead: the sex button, the long-term relationship button, and the friend button. And if you end up friends with her, you'll probably never have a romantic or sexual relationship with her. If she perceives you as long-term relationship material, she'll make you wait for sex because she doesn't want you to love her and leave her. So their idea is get to sex as quick as possible, because once you've had sex with her, you've busted through that weird psychological thing that goes on in her brain, and then you can decide what that relationship's going to look like. Not exactly a good plan, in my opinion, but that's what they're teaching. And the way they're perceiving it is that, yes, there's this blockade. And I had an experience, some of my friend zone blog posts came from having experiences where I was seeking to nurture friendships with women, because my way of doing romantic love that I promote, I call romantic friendships. So I see friendship as the foundation of romantic love. And so for me, it's about cultivating friendships and seeing if those evolve into more kind of thing. But I found with these different relationships that I was nurturing and stuff that I ended up in one way or another with all 3 of these relationships that I was, building at the time, that I ended up friends, kind of thing. So then, guys say, well, that just means that, don't go there, go to sex. Well, I won't do that. But what I really came to see when I read Matthew Hussey's book is he was saying that there are women just like me who are trying to go friendship first and are getting frustrated because they're getting friend zoned. So what that does tell me is that the friend zone phenomenon is really it's not a real thing. It's just people who either don't find a connection with you or are incapable of starting as friends and have an addiction for being swept off their feet or getting to sex first. And, those people, we just need to recognize they're there and move on until we find people who we can connect with on a more direct level, as friends that we're both interested in evolving it as it goes. So I think it's a phenomenon, but it's a phenomenon about certain people.
Certainly. And I think a lot of the time we get stuck with almost like these urban myths that people create, and then individuals use it as a means of pigeonholing people. Wouldn't you say the most easeful way to evolve out of this place, or to have more clarity in connection from the get-go, is by actually saying what it is that you want and sharing how it is that you're feeling? I mean, if you are spending time with an individual and you feel on a soul level, on an emotional level, that you're comfortable and you're really connecting, I mean, people always say they want to marry their best friend. So of course, friendship's a good foundation to start with. But when cutting through all the fat, be actually having a discussion that I feel this way about you, but I would like to, let's take the time to get to really know each other. Don't you feel that that's missing a lot of the time in today's communication when it comes to romantic connection?
Yeah, and I think, wouldn't that be refreshing, by the way?
Yes.
But I think that but again, this addiction for being swept off the feet and so forth can get in the way, because that doesn't sound very romantic. Oh, you mean you're going to just sort of clinically tell me you're interested in exploring a relationship that could lead in this direction? I personally, my ideal world would be that we have relatively independent people who have their own lives, but recognize that, like any of us, we desire this kind of connection, and we explore it together maturely, consciously. Yeah. So yeah, to me, conscious relationships would be very refreshing and very, very different than the game that's being touted out there.
Yeah, well, and it comes down to losing the game. I see a couple of people are watching. So if you're watching, Annette, that's very sweet. You've sent us kisses. Thanks for watching and sending the love. If you are watching, I'd love to you to say hi and where you're watching from. And please do weigh in on the conversation, or if you have questions at all, we'd love to address them. This, Love Talks is about having that open discussion about these things that a lot of the time when it comes to love and relationships and sex and dating in particular, we tend to have these discussions behind closed doors. So we're really opening up the dialogue tonight. Have you found yourself in the friend zone? And what has that experience been like for you? Do you have questions around that initial emotional connection and then it fizzling out? Does attraction have to be there for you first? I believe and teach from a place of really getting your own emotional house in order. So if you're doing things like you're love addicted, you're in love with being loved. We were having this discussion about with friends recently at a function, someone that we mutually knew that is in love with love. And when that dopamine hit sort of wanes, and maybe we can dive into sort of the biology behind of what happens when you get that initial hit, Kel, is that then it's on to the next. But that's an internal almost cleaning up that you need to do in order to get to a place where you can actually healthily have an emotional connection and even up level your sexual connection. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. The neuroscience about all of this, I'm echoing.
Hi, Alex.
The neuroscience of all this is very fascinating, and there's a great book called Cupid's Poisoned Arrow, written by a gal named Marnia Robinson, where she studied why her relationships kept collapsing on her. And she started to study the whole brain science side of things and started to understand that again, the attraction, sexual side of things, especially as we drive towards orgasm, is all very dopamine driven. Mm-hmm. And what happens with any dopamine pursuit over time is there's a law of diminishing returns. You don't get the same hit. So then you have to do something more extreme in order to get the hit again, and on you go. And of course, porn addiction is an example of pursuing that in that kind of dopamine track. And what she said is that basically in our mammalian brains, we have two programs related to our sexuality. One is the reproductive track, and the other is the bonding track. And the reproductive track is all about getting babies born, and it's dopamine driven, and orgasm is kind of its, peak or whatever sort of thing. And they've done studies that have shown that orgasm basically creates the same effect as a heroin hit. And what happens after that hit is you crash. And so what she came to learn is a style of lovemaking where you de-emphasize orgasm and you emphasize rich touch and luxurious touch, as I would say. It's called carezza, which is Italian for caress. Mm-hmm. And so they will make love for hours without pursuing orgasm. They'll just spend time caressing and connecting. And what that does is it allows a massive release of oxytocin in the brain, which is the chemical that we bond through. Mm-hmm. When a mother breastfeeds her child, there's oxytocin being released. When we touch, oxytocin is being released. So the more we can move our lovemaking even over to this kind of rich touch approach, more sensual rather than sexual, mm-hmm. The more we can actually create, again, that attachment I'm talking about, so that bonding side of things. And I think that is very, very critical for long-term relationships. We've got to get to the point where we are connecting in a deep way emotionally, and oxytocin is our friend then. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just a touch or an embrace can give you a release of oxytocin. And for women in particular, where it doesn't necessarily happen with men is when you do have sex, you might both get the dopamine hit, but it's the woman that has the release of oxytocin after. So yes. It's them attaching to the male and wanting, that's the biological response for, procreation and building a family. But men don't get it.
Yeah. So whereas they can get it if they change the way they make love. If they start making love in this more lengthy, rich touch way.
Yeah. And I think that's a great level of awareness that not a lot of people have. They'll get into this hit when they first meet someone, and then it sort of gallops away from them. So what other things can people maybe create a level of awareness about when first interacting and meeting with people? What are some things that maybe they can be reflecting upon, or even questions that they can ask themselves when they're first meeting someone, whether it be that real rush of attraction or someone that they just enjoy their company with? How can someone keep themselves on track? I'm assuming this is part of what you teach with helping people overcome any kind of porn addiction, is a level of awareness. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've got to, this stuff is so complex, right? Because whenever we're talking the dopamine side of the world, we're talking potentially addictive patterns, mm-hmm. right? And orgasm itself is an addictive thing. The more you have them, the more you want them, right? So there is a natural tendency in the dopamine side of the world to become addicted. So, all of us have to start. I mean, the first thing, like you said, is just the concept of awareness itself. Many people are just automatons. They just flow with whatever's hitting them, and they just follow it and see where it goes, right? And the first thing in any kind of area like this is to step back and see ourselves, to start to watch what we're doing. And I remember, if I can use the porn addiction as an example, when I was first making changes in that area, I started sitting back and saying, okay, first it comes after the fact, right? You're an automaton, so you're not used to thinking about what's going on in your life. So you have to kind of look at it after it happens and say, okay, what happened there? Mm-hmm. I ended up, in my case, masturbating to porn. What preceded that? What was the lead up to that? Oh, what kind of feelings were there? What kind of emotions was I going through? Okay, so when I feel like that, that's that's my natural tendency, is to head in that direction. So then gradually, as that awareness grows, you start catching yourself as it's going on. You start going, oh, I'm feeling bored, or oh, I'm feeling depressed or down or something like that. And then you see yourself go in that direction. So you start to notice it before it happens. And then you can start sitting with those feelings. Instead of just acting on them, you can pause, put a pause in there, and just feel it and say, okay, this is what I'm feeling. And so over time, we can teach ourselves to increase our awareness to the point where instead of after being our teacher, we actually can be aware as it starts to happen. We can see ourselves. We almost become an observer of ourselves. And many Eastern teachings, that's what they say is you're not the person doing this, you're the observer. You're the one watching the person doing this. So there's a bit of a separation within the self that we can achieve. And when we achieve that, suddenly the separation from the things that we've been doing almost mechanistically has happened, and now choice starts to appear, and we can start making choices.
Conscious choices, because we've been making choices, but just subconscious ones, which are old programming. Yeah. So is it fair to say that someone that maybe is always leading with the sexual foot is actually, it's an avoidance of the emotional?
Well, there's no question that somebody who is predominantly sexual probably lacks on the emotional side. And this is why, again, working with the love addiction, love avoidance terminology, normally an avoidant person is afraid of intimacy. They have a conscious fear of intimacy, actually. They have an unconscious fear of being alone, though, too, and that's what draws them into relationship. But they have a conscious fear of intimacy. It may not be conscious in the sense that they have awareness-wise said, oh, I have a fear of intimacy. But it's conscious in the sense that they do try and avoid real connection. So usually that kind of person ends up with an addiction, because when you're not prepared to connect emotionally within a relationship, you have to find your emotional something somewhere, because we all need emotional input into our lives. So usually someone who's avoidant will find it outside the relationship in some form of addiction. And when guys are out there, doing one night stands and things like that, predominantly there's probably that kind of sexual addiction going on, because they are this kind of avoidant person. And this is what's sad too, because what the pickup artists basically teach guys to do is to act like avoidance, because this bad boy, distancing kind of aloofness actually attracts love addicts, because they have such a need to be loved that they see in that person, the guy trying to pick them up or whatever, they see a guy like, say, the parent who didn't love them or whatever. They see that same thing mirrored again, and they want to heal that relationship, all on a subconscious level, but they're attracted to that. And they also see a lot of strength there. Like, I think the whole knight in shining armor, sweep you off your feet pattern is a very love addict, love avoidant pattern. Because the knight in shining armor is that strong guy. And the reason he looks strong is because he's emotionally aloof. He looks like he's totally together. He's got his act together and is strong and confident. But it's a confidence that's built on an inability to connect. I don't know if I'm answering this.
You are, but what I'm hearing, and I hope everyone else will hear as well, is that one person's imbalance is not only attracting, but capitalizing on the other person's imbalance. Because that's all it is. When people are coming from that space, they're just out of alignment with themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And it's called in, again, different terminologies, but it's called the love addicted tango. Because what will happen in these relationships, especially if they get together in a relationship, is one is chasing while the other is pulling away. And then when the one who's chasing gets tired of chasing, they pull away, then the other one chases again. And so, in the worst case scenario, you get these gals who are stuck in relationships with narcissistic guys, but they won't leave because there's a part of them that needs him to love them. And so, but he'll pull away. But if she starts to pull away and starts to catch on, he suddenly turns on the charm, and now he's as seductive as can be again because he wants to keep her in the relationship. I remember one time early on in my long-term relationship, with my wife, she came to me one time, wanting to do something. Can we do something together with her? And I literally looked at her and I said, can't you find something else to do with yourself? Like I was just so distancing in terms of what was going on there. But I mean, Mr. Charm at the beginning, to draw her in. And I remember having this sensation when we got married. Literally inside me, there was a sort of that's done. I have someone. So there's that need to have someone, but the inability to be with that someone. It's a very, very frightening thing to behold, really. And I spent years in that and not knowing what to do. I was aware. That was one of the hard things for me, is I was aware. I just didn't know what to do about it.
Or maybe even knew where it came from.
No. I mean, I found out years later that probably it was my mom. Usually a love avoidant is created through a relationship with a parent who uses the child for emotional nurturing instead of nurturing the child. And my mom, I know, was not able to connect with my dad, and she had me to give herself something in her life. And I spent my whole life taking care of her, essentially.
So let's maybe just touch on that a little bit, because I want to make sure that people are coming away from these talks with some know-how or places to start looking so that they can create balance within themselves as well. So I know the first place to look is to, without judgment, do some reflective work on your past relationships and looking for patterns.
Yeah, for sure.
So what you were describing earlier of the going back and forth, we tend to choose the same people because we're choosing them from a subconscious old storytelling or old belief. We're picking them to substantiate something we either feel about ourselves or feel about relationships.
Yeah. And I think, too, another thing, and this goes back to attraction again, attraction is a desire for intensity in the relationship and a real addiction to the idea that love is intense. I mentioned again in that blog post that you'll be sharing that Shannon Etheridge is a Christian author who's written a book, Every Woman's Battle, and she distinguishes between intensity and intimacy. Intensity is this thing that it's always got to be exciting. It's got to be, stirring and passionate and so forth, whereas intimacy is calmer. It's more a feeling of home. It's a feeling of comfortableness. And what often will happen with people who are emotionally wounded in terms of love addiction, love avoidance, is we find emotionally secure people boring. We don't get an intensity off of them, so we aren't attracted to them. So there's a real sign is, can you be with a person who isn't as exciting and still find that a worthwhile thing to nurture? Because we do tend, when we're love addict, love avoidant, to be attracted to that intense energy we get off the other person.
So wouldn't people have to go through their own journey in order to get to that place to acknowledge those people? I mean, we have to do our own work in order to find that level of attraction. If we're out of balance with ourselves, aren't we sort of destined to continue choosing those people that we think are going to fill?
Yeah. We will naturally, I mean, even myself, with the level of awareness I have about love avoidance and how it works, I still find that energy when I encounter a girl who's putting it out. I still find that energy very attractive. It's something that I don't think you'll ever lose the feelings of attraction for, because it's a dynamic that's embedded in us from a deep-rooted history, right? So it's not so much that we have to become not feeling that. It's that we need to become aware of what it is and recognize it. And then we can start making choices to say, this person is probably not good for me.
Mm-hmm. And understanding why.
Yeah. And some of that is understanding your past. I mean, I'm not really big on inner child work and whatever you want to call this stuff. But I mean, recognizing that, yes, I have patterns of behavior that I've seen in relationships over and over again, if I've had a lot of them and ended up in the same place, always with that emotionally unavailable guy in the case of the gals, always with someone who seems too clingy in the case of the avoidance, and it's funny too, because of course we interpret it as their problem. Right. Mm-hmm. Whereas it's like, no, like, and that was funny when I started sort of learning about myself and started discovering this whole question of avoidance. At first, I thought I was the problem. I thought I was the reason our relationship really didn't work out. But as I learned more, I realized, no, we were made for each other. Our emotional wounds matched up very nicely and we naturally attracted each other.
Yeah, so you're doing the choosing. The other person is also choosing you. So
yeah. And there's a reason why they're attracted to that avoidant energy as well. There's a reason why that guy looks like he can save me emotionally or keep me safe emotionally, or he seems strong, or he seems, and obviously there is a natural strength that's good. There's a confidence that's good, but usually there's an intensity factor going on there. That's a hint that it's not really that, and again, how stirred are you feeling? And I've had a chance, this last year, I mentioned a relationship that we just broke up recently. But it was a wonderful relationship, and it was one of the most least intense relationships I've ever had. But I just, the connection was just nice. It was just a very comfortable connection we had. And it was very fascinating to me to be with someone who didn't have that love addict intensity that I'm used to.
Being their own person.
Yeah, exactly. Having an element of independence, but really willing to connect. Yeah, and that's what I think is the ideal. If we can get to the point where we don't need someone, but we want to be with them, then we're getting in the right direction.
Right. So I'm going to bring us back to that word attachment then. I want people to understand that you're not attached to someone, even when you're dating, that you're not attached to an outcome.
Yeah.
But you're desiring a level of connection, but you're still maintaining your own identity.
Yeah. I like to, you may have noticed, I like to create fairly creative blog post titles so that people will kind of go, what? And I've got one coming that is called something like, not caring is the key to love. And what I'm saying by that is exactly what you just said, a certain element of outcome independence where you're not attached to the outcome. In a sense, this is what the Buddhists are talking about detachment, right? They're not talking about don't care about anything. They're saying don't care about the outcome of anything. Don't be invested in a particular outcome. Just simply enjoy life and participate in it, but love with an open hand.
Exactly. And that is a beautiful description of how everyone really should be dating. But we get so caught up in expectation or claiming of others, but it's something that's perpetuated in media, within society, that there's ownership in a way. And I think that's really what starts to trip people up. I want to share a lovely quote that you had shared with me from your blog post. That when you feel that affection arise that you've been interpreting as just friends in the past, start to recognize what is really happening. Because you are developing true intimacy by coming to know and value the real person before you. I love that. You want to talk about that a bit more?
Well, I mean, this is kind of my central point of what romantic love is. My first blog post ever historically is called What is Romantic Love? And I defined it as the desire to experience sexual intimacy, sexual fulfillment and emotional connection that's mutually shared and enjoyed. And I go on in the post to say, because you value that person for who they are. Mm-hmm. And that's really it to me. I think that the big issue I have that I'm trying to take a shot at in this Is It Love or Is It Addiction post is when we start off with, I've got to have all that chemistry, I've got to have all that excitement about the person, we're really putting the cart before the horse. Mm-hmm. I'd rather get excited about a person who I've come to know and really value, and now I really care about them and I really want to experience them. And I think that grows out of friendship. I think that grows out of a true natural bonding with someone who, sure, you have a baseline attraction, therefore. I don't think if you don't have that, I don't think you're going to be more than friends, right? I think there has to be an element of that there. But that's what I see is that can we get to the point where we can really just just take time to get to know someone and really come to care about them as a person and everything about them, right? Like learn about them, learn about what they care about, what they're passionate about. All of these things take time. It takes time. And yes, do things together too, right? That's part of what bonds us to someone, is being in situations. And I have a blog post I wrote called The Most Important Thing About Love I Learned from My Dog. And what it's about is Pavlov's dog. That when we experience positive experiences and we're with that person, we come to associate those feelings with that person. So we can actually build love between us by having shared experiences that we enjoy together. And so it's this investment in each other as people and taking that time to build that kind of bond that I think that's the root of love to me.
It is. I would agree with you wholeheartedly with it being the foundation that we all require in any relationship, romantic or otherwise. So are we saying that the new thrill is that connection and knowing of the other person, that knowing that you not only value them, but that they value you? That can give you a chemical hit as well.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's like, instead of just being excited on this biological level, doesn't it make a lot more sense to be excited about who you actually are? Who each other actually is? Yeah, and that's exactly it. And that's, again, what Shannon Etheridge says is that intensity fades, but intimacy grows the more you know a person.
Exactly.
So that's what we want. And that's what I'm meaning by attachment.
Yes.
Healthy attachment.
Healthy attachment. Yes. Yeah. Open up the floor a little and see if anyone has any questions. Alex is saying hi from Nebraska. Well, that's exciting. And I know that Annette is in Alberta. I really hope that the discussion that Cal and I have been having this evening starts opening up a dialogue, not only internally with yourself, but also within your own circle of people. You know, we're sort of force-fed, especially if you watch any ascendance of television, that it's the thrill, the eyes connecting across the room, that chemical flush through the body is really what you're looking for. And I guess really what we're talking about tonight, what you're sharing, Cal, is that we hope people are understanding that it's the deepening of the connection, of emotional connection, that really is going to not only have longevity, but give you that deeper thrill for the long term. Yeah. Anything that you would want to add to this conversation before we say good night?
I'm pretty happy with what we've had to say.
That's great. Me too. So what I would like everyone to do is to get a little curious about Cal and what it is that he does. Can you let everyone know where they can find you? And of course, we'll share all of your contacts after we wrap up tonight as well.
Yeah. So my main website is relationshipoptions.ca. And that's where I blog, and I'm usually putting about 2 blog posts out a week now. I've got it up to that pace. It's funny, when I was debating whether I should go to 2 blog posts a week, I wondered if I could keep it up, and now I'm writing about 4 or 5 a day, it seems. So I guess I'll be able to keep it up. But anyway, so relationshipoptions.ca. If people want to connect with me on Facebook as well, they can look me up there, and normally I'll accept friend requests. At this point, I haven't got a page created yet. I'll probably be creating that at some point in time soon. But so those are kind of the main ways to get a hold of me right now.
Marvelous. And do you have any sort of public talks? I know I came to attend one and listen to you. Have you got anything like that happening in the Vancouver area?
No, I don't have anything beyond tonight lined up yet, but I'm totally open to that if anybody wants to reach out to me.
Fantastic. Well, this video will be going up on YouTube, so you can see more of Cal there. And of course, the replay is available to you. If you're watching this evening, I wanted to thank you so much for connecting with us on Love Talk. next month is going to see me talking to Cindy Weber, and we're going to be having a discussion about open relationships and what exactly is that. And it's a popular topic right now, and there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding surrounding it, so we're going to provide you some clarity. So I hope you will join me again next month for Love Talk. So thanks so much for being on tonight and having this discussion. I encourage everyone to post your questions or continue the discussion within the event page, and both either Cal or myself would be happy to follow up with you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Cal. Have a great night. Thanks, everyone.